It was one of those quiet evenings when the hum of the fridge felt louder than my own thoughts. That's when I noticed Daniel's backpack, slouched carelessly on the couch, the zipper just slightly open. He'd told me he was going straight to work after the gym, but here it was, like it had been waiting for me. I told myself I was only going to grab my charger, nothing more. But there was this knot in my stomach, that whispering, uneasy voice that always shows up when something's off. My fingers hovered over the zipper, my heart thudding faster than it had any reason to. I pulled the zipper open, and his cologne drifted up, but there was something else beneath it, something faint, unfamiliar. My eyes landed on a makeup compact, the kind I've never owned, tucked neatly in a small cosmetic kit. Right next to it was a sealed pack of condoms. My breath caught, and for a moment, everything went quiet, like the air had been sucked out of the room. My hands started to shake, so I grabbed the edge of the couch, trying to steady myself. We hadn't been intimate in weeks, not because I didn't want to, but because he'd been too tired or too busy. And now, under the soft yellow light of our living room, all those excuses lined up like they'd been rehearsed. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. That's not me. Instead, this strange, icy calm took over. I closed the bag carefully, making sure every strap and zipper looked untouched. On the outside, I was still. On the inside, something had already broken loose, and I knew it wouldn't be put back together. I sat back, my eyes fixed on the bag like it might suddenly explain itself if I stared long enough. My pulse was steady now, but there was this slow burn building in my chest. I thought about the last few weeks, how he'd come home later and later, claiming a last-minute shift or helping a friend with something urgent. I remembered the faint scent of perfume that wasn't mine clinging to his jacket, the kind that didn't fade even after a wash. Every puzzle piece I'd been ignoring was now clicking into place, and the picture they formed was ugly. The urge to storm into wherever he was and throw the bag at his feet was strong, but I knew better. That's the thing about me. I don't explode, I calculate. My mother used to say, "If you keep your hands still and your voice calm, you'll see the truth faster than if you shout." She was right. My mind was already shifting from shock to something sharper, more focused. I wasn't just hurt, I was awake. And now that I was awake, there was no going back. I pushed the bag away from me and stood up, feeling the coolness of the hardwood floor under my bare feet. The apartment looked exactly the same as it had an hour ago, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a stage set, and I'd just found the prop that would change the entire play. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and forced a slow sip. I didn't need answers from him tonight. What I needed was time, and the right moment to use what I now knew. I carried the glass of water back to the couch and sat where his bag had been, as if claiming the spot for myself. My hands traced the seam of the cushion, grounding me, keeping me from unraveling. I thought about the woman who owned that makeup kit. Was she someone from the gym? A coworker? A stranger he'd met in one of those just grabbing a drink nights he swore were harmless? The questions kept coming, but they weren't frantic. They were orderly, lining up in my mind like names on a list I intended to check off, one by one. I could almost hear his voice in my head, smooth and confident, ready with the kind of excuses that once had me believing him. But not this time. I realized I was gripping my glass so tightly the condensation had dripped down my wrist, leaving a thin trail of cold. I set it down and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. A part of me wanted to feel broken, to let the grief in, but another part, stronger now, refused. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something else, something I'd control. By the time I stood again, the decision was made. I wouldn't confront him tonight. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me wounded or angry. He'd walk through that door thinking life was the same, unaware that the ground under his feet had already shifted. And when the time was right, I'd make sure he felt it crumble. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm, the kind of alertness that comes when your mind refuses to rest. Daniel was already gone, off to the gym, according to the note he'd left on the counter. I stood there staring at his handwriting, the loops and slants suddenly looking like lies inked onto paper. I poured myself coffee, each sip sharp and grounding, while my thoughts began arranging themselves like a map. This wasn't just about a makeup kit and condoms. This was about a pattern I'd been too willing to ignore. Memories started surfacing, the late nights, the faint traces of perfume, the way his phone always seemed to be face down on the table. I remembered the time I'd asked if I could join him at the gym, and he'd laughed it off, saying he preferred to zone out alone. I hadn't thought much of it then, but now it sounded like a cover story. I could feel the threads pulling tighter, weaving a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't turn away from. I knew I needed proof, not just for me, but for whatever was coming next. I grabbed my phone and started scrolling through his gym's social media page, the public posts, the tagged photos. That's when I saw it. Daniel in the background of someone else's picture, laughing, leaning in just a little too close. The woman's smile was wide, her hand resting on his arm like it belonged there. And on the counter beside her, the exact same makeup brand I'd found in his bag. I zoomed in on the photo until the pixels blurred, but the details I needed were crystal clear. The compact, the lipstick shade, even the faint pattern on her gym bag. It all matched. My pulse didn't race this time. Instead, a strange calm settled over me. I took a screenshot, then another, making sure to save them somewhere he couldn't find. If there was one thing I'd learned from watching people get caught, it was that timing and evidence mattered more than raw emotion. The more I looked at her profile, the more pieces slid into place. Posts tagged at the same restaurants Daniel had discovered recently. A picture from a night I remembered him coming home late, smelling faintly sweet, not like sweat from the gym. My stomach tightened, but I refused to give in to the sting of betrayal. Not yet. Every new connection only sharpened my focus. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was becoming a case file in my head. I leaned back, scrolling slowly, almost methodically, as if I were peeling away layers of their little secret. I wasn't rushing, because I wasn't going to confront him empty-handed. No. I'd let him keep walking around thinking I was in the dark. Meanwhile, I'd be cataloging every detail, every slip, every breadcrumb they left behind. And when the time came, the truth would be undeniable. By the time I closed my phone, I had a folder full of evidence, photos of his bag, screenshots from her profile, dates and times neatly tucked away in my notes. It was strange how methodical I felt. No tears, no shaking hands, just this steady, deliberate rhythm in my chest. I wasn't reacting. I was building something. Every little detail was a brick, and I was quietly constructing the wall that would eventually corner him in. I thought back to the early days with Daniel, when I believed every word he said without hesitation. Back then, I would have confronted him immediately, desperate for answers. But now? I understood the value of silence. Silence was power. It gave me space to think, to plan, to decide exactly how I wanted this to end. And I already knew. It wasn't going to be private. It wasn't going to be quiet. I sat there in the soft light of the kitchen, sipping the last of my now cold coffee, and felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just a girlfriend who'd been lied to. I was a woman who'd just been handed the script, and I was rewriting the ending. He didn't know it yet, but the game had already started. The decision to wait wasn't easy, but it was the smartest move I could make. If I confronted him now, he'd twist it, spin some half-believable story, and walk away thinking he'd dodged a bullet. I wanted more than an argument. I wanted a moment so sharp, so undeniable, that it would slice through every lie he'd ever told me. That meant I had to play along. Keep the smile, keep the routine, keep him blind to the fact that I'd already seen behind the curtain. That night, I slipped the makeup kit and the condoms back into his bag exactly as I'd found them. Every strap, every zipper, every angle was just as before. It was almost like putting a snake back into a box, knowing it would slither out again when it thought no one was looking. My hands were steady this time. No hesitation. The evidence wasn't going anywhere. It would be right there when I needed it most. Over dinner, I acted as if nothing had changed. I laughed at his stories, asked about his day, even reached across the table to touch his hand. He didn't notice the subtle difference in my gaze, the way I was memorizing him, storing away the way he looked when he thought he was winning. He had no idea I was already setting the stage for his downfall, piece by careful piece. The plan came to me while I was washing dishes, the warm water running over my hands as my mind pieced it together. If I wanted the truth to explode in his face, it couldn't just be between us. It needed an audience. I pictured him, caught in the glare of other people's eyes, scrambling for words while I stood there, calm and untouchable. That's when I decided on the surprise dinner. A celebration he wouldn't see coming, one that would burn his perfect little double life to the ground. I started with mutual friends, slipping the invitations into casual conversations, making it sound like a sweet, spontaneous gesture. Then I added a few of his colleagues, people whose respect he valued far too much. And for the final touch, I created a fake account. It didn't take much to find her, the woman from the gym, and send her a friendly, fabricated message. Big surprise for Daniel tonight. He's going to love it. I could almost hear the excitement in her imagined reply. By the end of the week, the guest list was complete, and the date was set. The restaurant was one of our favorites, a place layered with memories he'd now wish he could erase. I could already see it in my mind. The moment she walked in, expecting something entirely different, and the instant Daniel realized the walls were closing in. That thought alone made me sleep better than I had in days. In the days leading up to it, I played my part flawlessly. I texted him sweet reminders about the dinner, made light conversation about what he might wear, even joked that I had a little surprise planned. Watching him smile at me, completely unaware, was almost intoxicating. He thought he was the one keeping secrets, but the truth was, I was letting him dig his own grave one casual word at a time. Behind the scenes, I confirmed every detail with the restaurant, table for 12, near the center, where nothing could be hidden. I arranged for the photos I'd taken of his bag to be printed on thick, glossy paper. I wanted them to be tangible, undeniable, something that would sit heavy in the hands of anyone who saw them. This wasn't about rage anymore. It was about precision. The night before the dinner, I stood in front of the mirror, looking at myself differently. I wasn't just Lara, the girlfriend who'd been lied to. I was the woman who was about to turn his perfectly crafted life inside out. And the best part? He would have no idea until the moment it happened, right there under the warm glow of the restaurant lights. The night of the dinner I arrived early, my heels clicking softly against the tiled floor as the maitre d' led me to the table. The restaurant had that familiar golden glow, the low hum of conversation blending with the clink of wine glasses. It was the perfect backdrop, warm, inviting, completely unaware of the storm about to break. I smoothed my dress, not out of nerves, but to anchor myself in the moment. Every step of this night had been planned, and now, all I had to do was let it unfold. One by one, the guests arrived, friends greeting me with hugs, colleagues offering polite smiles. I played the gracious host, my laugh easy, my tone light. And then Daniel walked in, his face lighting up when he saw the familiar faces. He kissed my cheek, whispered something about me being too sweet, and pulled out a chair. He still thought this was about him. In a way, it was, but not the way he imagined. I kept an eye on the door, my pulse steady but alert. When she walked in, she had that certain sparkle, like someone who'd been promised something special. Her hair was freshly styled, her dress deliberate, her smile aimed directly at him. Daniel froze mid-sentence, the air between them thick enough to feel. And that was my cue to stand. I stepped toward her with the kind of smile you use when meeting someone you've heard so much about. "You must be the owner of the makeup and condoms I found in his bag," I said, my voice smooth, almost conversational. The words hung in the air like smoke, drifting over the table before anyone could react. Conversations died instantly, the clink of silverware silenced. Every pair of eyes swung between me, Daniel, and her. Her smile faltered first, confusion flashing into recognition. Daniel's jaw tightened, the muscles in his face twitching like he was searching for a script and finding nothing. He opened his mouth, but I was faster. I reached into my bag and laid the glossy photos on the center of the table, each one deliberate, each one facing outward so everyone could see. Gasps rippled across the room. A few people leaned forward, others leaned back, as if physical distance could save them from the discomfort. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was loud enough on its own. "I thought it was time everyone here knew exactly what he's been busy with," I said, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. And in that moment, I wasn't just exposing him. I was reclaiming every quiet night I'd spent wondering if I was imagining things. This was my confirmation, and his collapse, served in front of a full audience. The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting match could have been. Daniel's friends shifted in their seats, some avoiding eye contact altogether, others staring at him like they'd never seen him before. The woman's cheeks flushed a deep crimson, her eyes darting between me and the exit, as if she was calculating the fastest way out. Daniel reached for my arm, but I stepped back, my chair scraping slightly against the floor. He had no idea how far beyond his reach I'd already moved. I straightened, letting the weight of the moment settle exactly where it belonged. On him. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my tone polite but final, as if I'd just wrapped up a perfectly normal dinner party. My hand skimmed over the photos one last time before I left them there, like evidence at a crime scene. No cleanup. No chance to hide what he'd done. The room felt smaller now, tighter, the walls closing in on him just as I'd planned. Without another glance at Daniel, I picked up my clutch and walked toward the door, the sound of my heels sharp against the tile. Behind me, voices began to murmur, questions bubbling up in hushed tones. But I didn't turn back. This wasn't my scene anymore. I'd delivered the truth, and now I was leaving him to choke on it. By the time I got home, the night air had cooled my skin, but the fire inside me was still burning steady. I locked the door behind me, the click of the deadbolt feeling more like a final verdict than simple security. My phone lit up on the counter, 3 missed calls from Daniel, a handful of messages I didn't bother to read. I opened our chat, hit block, and watched his name vanish from my screen like it had never been there at all. Freedom could be that simple, I realized. Sometimes it was just one decisive tap. The apartment was mine, literally. The lease had always been in my name, and tonight, that fact felt like armor. I gathered a few of his things into a box, not with anger, but with a quiet efficiency that made the whole process feel almost cleansing. His scent lingered faintly on a sweater, but it didn't hit me like it used to. Now, it was just fabric, just remnants of a story I was no longer living. By the time I changed into something comfortable, I felt lighter, almost buoyant. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker like tiny promises. Out there, the world kept moving, cars passing, strangers laughing, lives unfolding. And I realized mine was about to do the same. But this time, it would be on my terms. The fallout spread faster than I expected. By morning, The story had already traveled through our friend group like wildfire. A couple of mutual friends texted me, some with sympathy, others with barely concealed shock. One even admitted, "I always thought something was off about him." I didn't bother replying to most. I wasn't interested in post-mortems or gossip. This wasn't about reliving what happened. It was about stepping into what came next. I changed the locks that afternoon. The locksmith worked quickly, his tools clicking and turning while I stood there sipping coffee, feeling the layers of my old life peel away. When the door swung open with the new key, it felt like crossing a threshold into something cleaner, safer. This was my space now, free from the lies that had once seeped into every corner. I could breathe here. And for the first time in weeks, I felt an undeniable sense of ownership, not just of the apartment, but of myself. Every room seemed brighter, not because the light had changed, but because I wasn't carrying his shadow anymore. It was a quiet victory, but it was mine. A few weeks later, I was packing a small weekend bag. My bag, my trip, my rules. No checking in with anyone, no explaining where I was going or why. As I folded my favorite sweater, I caught my reflection in the mirror and noticed something different. I wasn't just smiling. I was glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. This wasn't the grin of someone pretending everything was fine. This was real, born from the kind of peace you only find after you've burned down what was poisoning you. My little business idea, the one I'd shelved for years because the timing wasn't right, was finally taking shape. Between planning trips and late-night brainstorming sessions, my days felt full in the best possible way. And every now and then, I'd get a text from a friend saying Daniel's reputation had taken another hit. I never asked for details. It wasn't my story to follow anymore. The ending, at least for me, was already written. As I zipped up my bag, I thought back to the night I'd opened his. "The last time I opened a bag, I lost him," I murmured to myself with a smirk. "This time, I found me." And just like that, I stepped out the door, locking it behind me. Not to keep anyone out, but to keep this new life exactly as I wanted it.